starting off with how should we begin again? Unfortunately, Fong, who is the creator, artist who initiated this work, is in Montreal. I mean, it's not unfortunate for her, but it's unfortunate for us. She's there making a new work right now, and so what Joe and I have done is we've had like a series of conversations ahead of today, and we have made a recording of some of those conversations. So Joe has like prepared a virtual contribution, so we'll still get to hear from Joe in that way today. And I'll do a bit of an introduction to that. Yeah, we're aiming to have lunch at 1. We didn't quite manage that on time yesterday, but we'll see how we go. We'll still aim for that today, and we'll keep you updated if we're getting a bit behind ourselves. Let me get my notes together. So I prepared some words to introduce How Should We Begin Again and the artistic side of that work, and also a couple of videos just to give you a sense of that work and what it involves. So this was the second NEUROLIVE commission. It was performed here in November 2022. How Should We Begin Again is a 2-day live installation that was initiated by artist Fong and created and performed by 50 people, including members of the scientific team as performers. Joe describes How Should We Begin Again as a creative action between portraiture, protest, and something like a prayer. Just a moment to be in the moment. The performance is a collective action that consists primarily of a continuous series of individual live investigations, interspersed with occasional group moments. Each person involved is invited to contribute 12 pieces of music, of which 3 are randomly selected and played for them in no particular order. Each person interprets this opportunity. It's about taking up space, being seen, being present, and for some it's simply about liveness, the act of being in the moment. The performance runs continuously for 8 hours each day, and over the 2 days, nothing repeats. Audience members are invited to book a ticket for the time they want to arrive, and then stay as long as they like. So what I'd like to do now is just show that little video trailer, please. Albane, it would be great if you could just show that. This is a 6-minute film which has snapshots from the entire 2 days in the order that they happened. So that's a snapshot of how should we begin again, with many familiar faces, lots of people in the room today who have who are in there, are people who've been here in the past few days as well. Love seeing that. So I'm just going to say a bit more about, so I guess with a combination of some of Joe's words and some of my words about Joe's artistic research in this, and the artistic research that she initiated around this work. Jo speaks about her artistic practice of liveness as a social work. How Should We Begin Again is an investigation of and a belief in liveness as a potentially transformative public microsocial dimension where forms of community, inclusivity, connection, and belonging can be individually and collectively created, embodied, and felt. The title, How Should We Begin Again, refers to the experience of emerging from the forced pause of the pandemic and the potentials that this holds for nourishing and replenishing what people need, as well as for demolishing and unlearning structures that limit, oppress, and exclude. Jo describes the work as being about returning to the body, returning to ourselves. The 50 performers who co-create the work are people with a range of different ethnicities, different bodies, ages, genders, and different relationships to performing. For some, it is their first time taking part in a dance performance, and others have decades of experience. During a series of preparatory workshops, practical tools for meeting liveness are generated and developed. But the performance itself is not rehearsed or predicted before it happens, and it only happens once. Jo's invitation and challenge to each performer is to take the time and space of their performance as one where they give themselves permission to be making themselves at home, while giving the audience permission to witness them in that liveness. Drawing on her long experience as an artist in dance and on her lived experience as a person, Jo is interested in asking, in liveness, can you really see me as a person living in this moment? And can I really see you? Jo's work in liveness is deeply invested in making the spaces between people available to social connection. Many aspects of the way the performance is designed by Jo work to minimize the sense that the performers and the audience are categorically separate types of groups, rather than people who are all part of a process of being with one another. This approach plays out on many levels, but an especially concrete example is the way that the seating areas are designed as spaces where audience members and performers alike sit and witness together. Throughout the performance, performers emerge from, return to, or pass through that shared space, making it practically impossible for audience members to divide the people in the room into performer and non-performer groups. Anyone in the room, including themselves, could be part of this process and is part of it. So, it would be great if we could show the other video now, please, Albane, thanks. So this is a conversation between Jo and I, reflecting on Jo's experience of creating How Should We Begin Again in the interdisciplinary context of NEUROLIVE, which, Jo and I had this conversation a few weeks ago.
I think I wanted to talk a little bit about how we came together as well, you know, like liveness, essential to the work that I do. The theme of the scientific study, completely, liveness in performance, all its aspects. And I think my first, what I'm recording from the beginning was like, how can you possibly record any of these like intangible things that are happening between performers and audiences, and what, you know, like, how can you record this thing that's in the air somehow? And I think, on the one hand, this science project was one of the pillars of the creative process. So we were there right at the beginning of NeuroLive and at the beginning of How Should We Begin Again. And I guess the pillars for me were holding this question, how should we begin again, which means taking over space, being with people who are different to us, making a kind of support network, forming community, which is about, you know, it's this post-COVID time, really beginning that to form connections, to touch one another again, all of these things, all the kind of human, close gaze, to be in proximity, all of this stuff that felt sort of essential, that had been kind of zoomed out. We'd been zoomed. And so it felt very ripe to dive into the project together. So you've got all these, they are pillars: place, people, what's needed, the silence project, the recording of that. Like, it felt like process really cooked together in a way that you want a show to stand up properly at the end by itself, to really sort of stand up with its intention and the people who are involved. And that's why I call the science part of this a kind of pillar for it. It was almost like when the scientific equipment, the headsets and the eye things came into the performance, it was like another way of attending or witnessing. It was like honouring. So it made it even more special somehow to have all of that equipment in the room. And I really do recall like trying to fend off the science from the textures of the performance. Like, it's the body we're looking at, it's people we're looking at that during the performance, it's them in space. How are we going to kind of empathetically view these people when they're kind of clad? And I didn't want anybody to be burdened or kind of, unable to inhabit this. And then there were two performers that really enjoyed putting it on. Oh my gosh, what's their names? So there was two.
I think it was April and Jolene.
Yeah, so they were like super. I remember April put it on, and they put the equipment on, and they suddenly said, "Oh God, I feel like me." That inhabiting this extra kind of costume, it felt like their body, and I know from their movement qualities, it felt really apt that they could wear this. And actually, on the day Jolene was, he was not very well. He'd been ill, and I think on the morning or the day before, and so he was quite limited, like physically, compared to some of the other performers. But it was fully inhabited, and it was fully him on the stage. So it didn't feel like the equipment got in the way at all.
Yeah.
I guess there are questions for me, which is like, did we record the right things? Like, we were talking about things that perhaps I'm really fond of, not wanting to over-describe or to define, because there are so many undefinable things happening within live performance. But I do recall a moment where I think the science team, Guido, was sort of saying, this is where we're at the science, with the equipment that we have. This is where we're at, and this is all we can record. Actually, there are choices, but this is what we've chosen to record with the equipment that we currently have. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a kind of like admitting that we can't record this. And we were similarly, this wasn't about a technical, we weren't making a film. We did film it, but we weren't making a film. We were making an encounter that anybody that comes into the performance gets to see who this person is and how they are, and where they're at, So, yeah, I think it was very well navigated.
And when you say record, you also, what I hear you also referring to is measurement, right? It's like can this be measured? And these the sort of scientific measurement equipment that was involved. Yeah.
I didn't want judgment to be part of the show. I didn't want the audience's judgment. Are they a good dancer? Are they not a good dancer? Are they, I don't know, eloquent? Are they interesting enough? I didn't want that kind of space. So I was quite keen to look after all of the stuff that happened before as well, the entry points to meeting, to, the arriving in place, when audiences arrive at Siobhan Davis Studios, how do they meet the work? How are they welcomed into the space? How are they hosted? It was really fantastic. And also all the questionnaires that happen after. How does that happen in a kind of in a non-technical way somehow? Mm-hmm. But I think we really hit on a great mark by having members of Siobhan Davis Studios as part of the performance team. Had science team members in the show. There was this really wonderful, a really wonderful mesh of people coming from lots of different angles, and it is true. But when we did this show once again, and we didn't connect with we did it twice more, but we didn't connect with one of the venues properly, and it felt abrupt. It felt like they weren't part of this, I don't know, celebration, in a sense that we just kind of rented a room and we're just inhabiting it, whereas the piece needed everyone to feel like they own this building and like they own this project. And yeah.
Thank you, Jo. I'm glad that she could be with us in that way. I just want to say a few more things to sort of, point towards, I guess, the way, some of the things that How Should We Begin Again challenged in this project. From my perspective, sometimes I think about How Should We Begin Again as peak liveness, within, at least in the experience of this project. And there's a few, I guess to sort of reiterate just a few of the kind of conditions that made the work very challenging for the science team. Hopefully not impossible, but very challenging, and hopefully in a way that is important as a provocation within the context of this project. So the work is prepared. but it's not rehearsed. It happens only once, and nothing in the work repeats. It's 16 hours long, with just one overnight pause halfway through. The focus is on each person being and being seen as their fullest self, as completely unburdened as possible. That word unburdened was one that Joe uses a lot in relation to this work. So anything that, and I think also it's useful to remember the word portraiture. That is one of the words that Joe very strongly associates with this work. Almost like the performances are somehow portraits or ways of self-portraiture. So anything that constrains or reduces or extracts from this unburdened state that's being aimed for, and the visibility of that unburdened state, is working against the core purpose of the work, which is at once an artistic and also a deeply political purpose. And so it sets up a big challenge, which I'm very grateful that we rose to, that the team rose to. So, Guido, do you want to say a bit about the sort of scientific experimental design?
Yeah, I think most of that is going to be covered by the people on the team. So I'm just going to say a few things. So for both How Shall We Begin Again and for the Performing and Not Performing show, we introduced a new measurement device, and those were eye movement sensors, which we didn't have for the first one. So there's a lot of focus, and it comes up in how Joe talks about seeing and being seen. So there's a lot of focus on looking behavior in our analyses, and that will be true for both works that we'll talk about this morning. Other than that, I just want to introduce the people who have been part of this team and who have been analyzing this data for the last 3 years. So that's Sonia, Albane, Hernando, who's a postdoc in the group and now at Goldsmiths. Mirko, Febbo, who's a computer scientist and artist with a special interest in data visualization, which was very useful for this project in particular. And Albane Arthuis, who's a PhD student on the project, who's an AI engineer and has been leading on the eye movement analysis. And with that, I'll hand over to Mirko.
I might go to... Bonjour. Okay. So, yes. So I'll go over a little bit introducing the science aspect of How Shall We Begin Again. So we'll go with this. So we already saw a little bit the introduction about the whole performance aspect, and I'd like to reiterate again how immense that particular project is and how humongous. We're talking 50 performance, 2 days, 15 minutes per performance that we don't exactly have a particular time lapse, so they start and last about 15 minutes. And they have 3 songs that are random and start and stop at random time as well, depending on the DJ feel of the performance. Which, as my role was to synchronize that and gather the most information possible, which made it a little bit challenging, but we found a way around it. So one of the other aspects that was a bit challenging is, as you know, 8-hour performance. We don't have people with EEG set and eye tracker all the time, so they were coming in whenever during the performance and leaving whenever. So that also means that we needed to find a way to first know within the data that they have arrived and they have left, and that was a cumulative work of me behind the computer sending message and Albane looking at all the video to make sure that everyone was in when we confirmed they were in. In terms of data that we gather, we're talking quite a bit of eye sensor data, 21-hour cumulative, as well as 12 hours of EEG data. We could have more, but we had some problem with the hardware. And this is the hardware. So we have the phone, which connect to the eye trackers. and the EEG, which connect to a tablet. First challenge I had was those are two different communication protocol for us to gather the data. For example, the EEG can receive LSL message, which is great. So I'm sending one message, all the EEG are picking it up. That's fantastic, simple, great. The eye trackers are working with API, which is a bit different. So that means I need to send one message individually to each phone. So when you have 23 phones, that's a lot of messages I'm sending at the same time. Cool. Yeah, and more data that we gathered. So the EEG is 32 channels, and we have, from the eye trackers, we have video scene, audio, gaze, fixation, blink, and head movement as well, and also behavioral data. So the first part of this whole project was to figure out how to synchronize the data, so that's where I come in. I made that software, which is that beautiful blurry matrix-like windows on the side, which basically tracked when eye tracker was nearby, which also meant that EEG was nearby, and send message as well as figure out the battery level. Another thing that this particular software did was picking up whatever song was playing at the moment and recording it within the data so that we can know which song was playing at which time and if there were silence or not, because that was really useful for the analysis later on. And then a huge problem that we had after that was that this is 8 hours worth of data, all spread out during the day. I first made a metadata file that we called, which was a CSV file that was impossible to understand what the hell was happening in there. So then I decided to make a website, an interactive website where you can gather all the information into one. So you have the top panel, which represents the whole day and when a participant was coming in. So in green, you'll have the song that they're playing, the performance, so who's performing at that time. It's all anonymous at the moment. And the participant, so the EEG participants in yellow. And once you select one of those participants, you can then expand on to see, okay, which performance did this participant see, as well as which song played during those particular performance. So you get a full breakdown of what the particular participant saw. As well, you can do the same thing with the performer and see which participant saw that performance and which song played. And then you have some metadata linked to that, start, stop, how much data did we get from each devices. So that was really helpful later on. And then I was asked to do audio analysis of all the songs, but I was really bad at audio. So I found that Spotify has a really, really useful API that you can just pull all that data for each song. So I just managed to use that. So now within the data visualization, you can also see Spotify metrics. And they have a metric for liveness, which is just them asking like, how likely is this event being happening with the public? So, for example, you're listening to a song. Is that a live event in the sense like were people in the audience clapping or whatever? And yeah, so that's the whole shebang, how it looks like. Yeah, I think that's mainly it for me. Yeah, that's you.
Hello, I'm shorter. Is that okay? I guess that will be okay. Yeah. Hi. Cool. Okay, so that's me. Thank you, Mirko. As like Mirko said, the visualization helped a lot because there is a lot of data. So Mirko mainly presented the data we got during the performance, which were so the EEG data and the eye trackers data that you can see on the middle panel here. There is also a beautiful picture of Iris wearing all the equipment. But there was also other data. We collected 2 sets of answers from questionnaires for each participant, one before the performance and one after the performance. The pre-performance questionnaire, as we call it, was mainly on each participant personality traits and how they are in their daily lives. That's things that we use in psychology. So it's mainly demographics, so age, age, background, etc. And then we also had a few other scales, such as mind wandering. So it's how people tend to mind wander either spontaneously or deliberately in their life. A scale of empathy, a scale called Big 5 Inventory. It's a measure of 5 big personality traits: openness, neuroticism, agreeableness, and 2 other one. Yes, don't forget it. Extraversion and consciousness. Yeah, thank you. And the last one was the Dance Sophistication Index, which measures of dance expertise, not only if you're trained in dance, but also if you tend to watch dance a lot, either live or recorded. So it's not only if you're a trained dancer, but also how much you tend to consume dance as an art. So that was the pre-performance questionnaire for all the participants, and then after the performance, each participant was asked to, for each performer they saw, because as Mirko, as everybody mentioned, people could come and go in the space, so we would ask them after to say who they saw. I also know, thanks to the visualization, when they were in the space, actually. So sometimes people were like, oh yeah, I saw this performer, but they actually didn't see that, so that's not in the data. So I cleaned everything. Anyway, the questions we asked were only 5 questions. There were 3 questions that were to rate on a scale of 0 to 100 how connected they felt to each performer they saw, how focused they thought they were on the performer, and also a question on familiarity to account for how well you knew the person beforehand, because we thought that maybe if you know the person beforehand, you tend to feel more connected, or there is something, it changes how you behave when you look at this specific performer. We also asked 2 open questions, one on maybe engagement and mood. We asked them, tell us what happened and tell us how you felt. Yes, so that's everything we collected in sum, and these are some results. So this thing on the right is a correlation heat map. So basically what you have is each measure of the post-performance questionnaire that I just talked about, so familiarity, focus, and connection. And then on the open questions, so how did you feel and what happened, we did a sentiment analysis, and basically you have feel count and happen count that are the number of words each participant would write, and then it's a measure of how positive or negative these words would be. So this correlation is basically when you is saying, so basically, for example, the first one on the left is saying that when you tend to know the person beforehand, so when you rated a higher familiarity, you rated a higher connection. So that's a bit what we expected, that you know this person, so you feel more connected to them when you saw their solo, compared to maybe someone you didn't know. So what we find here is that exactly what I just said about familiarity, but also the big thing is that the more you report that you were focused on a performer, the more you tend to feel connected to them. And connection is also linked to how much you report like positive feelings, which is itself connected to how many words you write. So it seems to there seems to be something about how connected you feel to others. The more you would write about your experience, maybe the more you would engage later, the more you can maybe say you are focused on them. So this idea of focus is very interesting for eye sensor data. So I'm mainly presenting, Sonia later will present the possibly EEG data. Here it's only eye tracking, eye sensors data. So on this idea of focus, we wanted to know two things. If people were able to tell how focused they were on each performer, but also would they look more at the performer if they felt more connected. I'm not saying that if they are more connected, they are looking more at them, but maybe it's also the other way around. It means that maybe you look a lot at someone and then you feel more connected to them. So it's not, there is no causation here. I'm only talking about correlations. So just a little thing on eye tracking data. As Mirko said, eye tracking data is head movement, blinking, and gaze location. And here I have a little extract of, for example, this participant. I don't know if it's going to play. Anyway, the red circle here shows where the participant is looking. You can see that, okay, it's like tilted a bit. It's because we are also measuring head movement. So maybe the participant is looking like that, but we know where they are looking on that frame in front of them. So here, the participant is looking at the performer, for example. But in what we have in this is a visualization, but what we do have is only coordinates. So we don't know what they are looking at. We know where they are looking at on that frame, but not what. So what I did is I applied a model, a deep learning model that would detect all bodies on each frame and then correlate where the bodies, and then compare where the bodies were with where the participant is looking, if that makes sense. So then, because I know where bodies are on each frame, I can tell if a participant is looking at a body or not. So if you remember well, I said that this idea of focus was really focusing on the performer and then trying to see if the person would be looking more at the performer. But I'm not going to put a lot of suspense there. As you can see here, I detect all the bodies, so also the other participants or the other audience members. So the numbers I'm showing here, I'm not making a difference in between if the participant is looking at the performer or at other audience members. What I created is a percentage of time each participant is looking at others, which is this gaze body variable on the right here. And what we find with this is that actually there is a significant correlation. So significant is these 2 stars. It means that there is a real correlation. It's happening in our data that gaze body is correlated with focus, that people can tell the more they would look at other, the more they would be focused. And also they report more positive feelings when we know that they are looking more at other people. So it adds to this, this big frame of connection, being connected to positive feelings and number of words. And the more you look at others, you not tend to be directly feeling more connected to others, but there is a connection through reporting positive feeling and feeling focus. And just a little bit more on blinking data. There's just fresh analysis. So as I said, there is gaze location that took a long time to analyze. But I also used the blinking data from the eye trackers. And something interesting that we find is that as an audience member, if you tend to blink more during a solo, the less you would report being focused and connected. It makes sense because you're blinking. So maybe your eyes are more closed, so you feel less connected to someone. It makes sense on the whole overall picture of you're not looking at them because your eyes are closed, or you suppress them by blinking. Something interesting, I think, is that idea that if you blink more, when you report that you know someone beforehand, you also tend to blink more. So why would that be? Why would that be that you, that I know this person, but I blink more? Like, it's not interesting to me, even though I said that if I know this person, I feel more connected to them. I think it's because the more you know this person, you're used to this person, so it's less novel, and you tend to be to focus, and your attention seems to be heightened when there is novelty. So if you know this person, you feel more connected to them, but at the same time, it's less threatening, because you don't have to be like, who is this? What are they going to do to me? You know this person. However, in our data, so there is this really interesting thing on familiarity, but on our data, as you can see here, the blue peak is, so this is the proportions of familiarity. So basically, most of the participants didn't know at all the performer, so there is very less variability. So there is this kind of interesting data on familiarity, but it has to be listened with like very, you have to be careful with what you're saying, because nobody actually really knew the performers, so there has to be other analysis and other experiments on that. Yeah, so what to remember just on the eye tracking side of this, of the How Shall We Begin Again performance, maybe that the more people report positive feelings, the more they report feeling connected to others, and this links people's reported experience of the solo, so how much they would write to the connection felt to the performers. The more people looked at others, the more they felt connected to them, mediated by how focused they were. And on the blinky side, blinking activity is also linked to connection and focus felt by the participant. So there was quite a lot of things, but now I hand over to Sonia for the EEG part.
Hello, thank you, Albane. Hello, everyone. So, as you've heard already, this performance was quite challenging from the experimental side, from the scientific side. I guess you already know, but in science we like to measure, we like to control, we do these experiments where everything is super controlled, you repeat 100 times each thing, so you can make sure, you can do average, you can have a bit of what we call power for analysis. When it comes to EEG as a technique, the type of data that we gather is sort of like continuous data from all the electrodes that they have in their head, and the resolution that we have is milliseconds. So it's very good to explore what's happening in terms of like temporal information. But the temporal dimension here was crazy. So we have all these hyperscanning data. Hyperscanning means that we are collecting from more than one person at the same time. So we had 19 mobile devices for EEG. Those 19 mobile devices were used by 77 participants. So we just had all these mobile devices that people were coming in, you put this one, and then when they come back, we have more available, so people were coming in and out, and it was very messy compared to what we usually do in science in terms of like, timings and this sort of thing. It was a 2-day performance, so instead of having like 1 hour recording, we had 16 hours. And apart from that, this was like, I think for me, I just came to join the project at this point, at the second performance, and I think for me, it felt something important. It felt important in a way that it was challenging. We're challenging science, we're challenging the technology, we're challenging not only on a technical level, but also in a conceptual level. Like, it's you know, we get a lot of control and we get very specific in the lab, but how real is that is a very good question, right? So this felt very important in a way in which we were taking science out from the lab and we were really trying to, you know, go one step farther. So I'm not a dancer, but I really like the project in many ways. Okay, let's talk a bit about the EEG. So yeah, different challenges when it comes to the experimental design. I love the performance, but then I was like, okay, what am I gonna do with this? So there was no a priori start or ending times, so each person was moving freely, coming in or out when they pleased, right? So we need to track all that afterwards. Then we had these synchronization events that, thank you, Mirko, that was really, really the only key that we had to face the problem. So we had all the EEG devices, we had all these LSL triggers, the slab streaming layer, so that he was sending these messages through the Wi-Fi to all the devices at the same time. So then we had sort of a ground truth of time, so we can put everything together, everyone together. And yeah, and then we had these 50 performers, everything is different, nothing is repeating, so that is very challenging because we usually need like several repetitions in order to make sure that the questions that we want to answer are sort of, yeah, more robust. So I was thinking, okay, how am I going to face this monster of EEG data? How am I going to try to tackle the information that is hidden in there, right? So we were thinking, well, what sort of structure do we have from the artistic piece? So we had 50 performers that created 50 solos, but then we also have 9 group sections. Each solo section, as they have explained already, were 3 songs interspersed by 2 silences. So I hold on to that. Like, okay, there's some bit of a structure here that we can have. And then the group sections were just 1 song and then multiple people. So I tried to wrap this up in my head. I was like, okay, so overall data structure, we can say that we have 16 hours, which are roughly 59 sections that don't repeat. And those are made of 159 songs and 100 silent time windows. Now, how did we start to look at how did we start to understand what we could do with this data? So thank you, Mirko, again for the visualization. That's just an example on like selecting just roughly 4 minutes from the Sunday performance. If we look at those 4 minutes, we can look at different performers, as Mirko explained before. In blue, there were the music or silences, so the songs are in blue. The orange are the different performers. So just to give you a taster of what the EEG analysis is and what we've been like looking into, we decided to anonymize all the performers and call them by flower names. So that's why I have here Rose and Tulip. And as Mirko was explaining before, we can see, okay, the audience members that were present at every time. So then it's like, that's all the data that we have at this point for this performer. And then we can also use the songs as a way to navigate that time axis. So just as an example, I trimmed just to 2 performers, Rose and Tulip, and this is all the, all the available ways to look at the data that we have just from this, like, 6 minutes. So that was the synchronization problem that we had to work together, and it was challenging, but it was, yeah, we did it. Then we created, you probably heard from this yesterday, but for the first performance with Laura and Henny, we did create a sort of a standard way of pre-processing, so cleaning this EEG data. EEG is usually done in the lab, so you usually don't have to face much of the movement that is going on. You don't have any Wi-Fi in the lab. You have a Faraday cage that is protecting you from any electromagnetic activity going on. So there was a lot of new noise that we had to clean from the signal, right? The signal you wanted to be just the brain. So we are still at this point where we are still cleaning all the data. Well, we've just passed through it. We've had help from one of the members on the audience today, Anastasia as well. It's been helping us. But yeah, this is the sort of things that we can extract from the EEG. We've been looking from the previous performances. We know that the way of looking at this, the most useful way, as we don't have any repeated events, nothing is repeated, we're going to look at more like whole brain analysis, and we're going to look at the spectral activity. So we're going to look at power on different frequency bands. So I just wanted to give you an idea of like what these frequency bands are. We have delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. They all happen at different hertz. And then from that, we can extract the power at each of those. We can extract this power by performance, by frequency band. As you can see on the right, so we have rose and tulip, and there's like, what is the average topography of the brain at that frequency band for that performance? That's a way to look at it. Then one question here, if we can look at that, would be, okay, how does the behavioral ratings perhaps, or the percentage of looking at the performer versus not looking at the performer, is that modulating the EEG data that we have? Is that modulating power? That is still to be answered. And then I wanted to show you as well, this is sort of the power dynamics that happened during the, this just snip of the performance. So we have, in black is the average, and then each color is a different frequency band. And we can see how it's very dynamic in a way. So the plot on the background, in white, it's white background is music. In gray is the silence. So we can see there's like across, as you go through different sections, the whole dynamics are changing. In the bottom of the slide, you can see calculated, extracted all the power by frequency band, by every section. So we can see that there are certain dynamics that are playing here that we don't want to lose that time, you know, that, yeah, that important access. But this is, well, we would like to do that. That's what was done with detective work when it was 1 hour performance. But we do have 16 hours performance. And we don't have everyone attending at the same time. So we don't have, from the science perspective, all the power for analysis that we would like. So we've been thinking, okay, what are all the things that maybe we can also look at, and perhaps we have more, a more robust answer, no, to give. So apart from replicating what has been previously found in the first performance work, I come from a multisensory sort of background for my PhD, and I was thinking, okay, well, we do have sections that are music versus silence, and there is something completely different, right? Like you have an auditory dimension here that is not happening on the other one. We can start by looking at this. We are gonna have enough sections, you know. That's sort of an structure that repeats, that we can use. Within all the variability of the different people across the 16 hours, we can have enough power to look at this. So that is what I'm working on at the moment, but not finished yet. And another important thing that we want to look at, and that Albane is going to be key, is put together all the EEG data with the eye tracking data, and that is going to be very interesting to see how our eye behavior, so whether we are looking at the performer or looking at audience members or just staring at the ceiling, how is that really modulating, you know, what we can see with the EEG, what we can see what's going on in the brains. Are people synchronizing more when they're all just staring at the performer, or is there a different type of synchronization that is happening within the audience members? It's all questions for now, no answers. But yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for everyone that collaborated with us on this project, all the 50 performers that did an amazing job, and everyone, yeah, that helped us. I don't know if now it's Matthias, Guido.
Thank you, everybody. Just before we invite questions, I just wanted to drop in a reference to one of the layers. So, thank you, Sonia, for putting these credits here. You notice that there's a credit for audio description design, and I just want to mention Shivangi Agrawal, and just to say that this was sort of something that came up interesting that came up during the creation of this work, is that we tried to find a way to provide audio description with one of the days of this performance, and that Shivangi, who is also a performer in the work and has expertise in audio description, worked together with a group of several other performers in the work to offer sort of a relay of audio description, but in a very kind of unique way, because usually an audio describer would watch a work in advance and generate an audio description which they then deliver to the audience during the performance. But in this case, that's not possible. So what Shivangi did, knowing the process from the inside as a performer, was develop a kind of score for audio describers that they could use to generate their audio description in the moment of the performance. So that was another really interesting thing that happened during this process. So yeah, it would be great to hear questions and hear your thoughts.
That's an insane amount of data. That's really incredible. I mean, Matthias told me about this, but I didn't quite. It's the full month. It's all here. Sonia, just out of curiosity, I'm just if you're, or Mirko, or also Albane, if you're, where do you do most of your work? Like where? Like location? Like.
Where?
Yes, like literally where? Where do you feel like most of your labor takes place? Like.
Well, we do have weekly meetings, and we also just been co-working in university spaces.
Yes, yeah.
Where we could have the space to work on. Is that what you
And at home?
Well, yeah, at home.
Yes,
at home sometimes, but there were, it depends, right? If you're working alone, then you might stay at home, but because I was saying, like, it's been sort of a group effort, like,
yes.
to really, like, decode the synchronization problem, what was going on there. All this amount of data is not something like, if I had to do it on my own, I don't know how many years that would be. So, yeah, we try to work as a group, which has been very nice.
When you say that, that you didn't have some of what you needed for more scientific, and there was certain the direction of travel you might have taken if you had a different data set that you were able to collect things more systematically or something like that. But now you've got this data, so you're trying to imagine another way of interpreting it, or looking for other clues, other patterns that might relate. I mean, I suppose that then the three of you and have that conversation about what might.
Yeah, not just one and not just the three of us. So many conversations, all of us trying to think like what would be the best way of really like looking at all this data. It was not just one conversation decided forever. We've been facing different challenges, and it's been evolving in a way, the way that we were thinking, okay, a priori we would like to do this, and then we see like what can we do, right? I think, from the science perspective, we need to control and be systematic, and there's a methodology to it that you get used to it and it works, right? But then with this, as I was saying, this has been challenging, but also like in a very creative way, because you couldn't work it out a priori, like this was art and this was, like respected as that in a way. And then we were like, okay, how can we adapt to this? How can we think of new ways or think of creative solutions, to really like understand what's going on without maybe like disrupting the art. Yeah. Anyone wants to say something?
More questions?
Yeah, it's kind of along the same lines a bit, maybe. So after you've done all of this and you're now looking at the data and everything, is there anything you would change, I guess, about the setup or the way that you recorded the data, or maybe the devices you used? Would you include heart rate, or I don't know, different neuroimaging technique, etc.? So tell me.
Yes, I think this is a question for me. So we had a lot of problem with the data gathering tools, mainly the EEGs. I don't know if it's a good time to talk about this. The first performance, we realized that the EEG, the antineural setup, while advertised as mobile, had a huge flaw that if the USB that connects the amplifier to the tablet, which is where the data is gathered to then be recorded, is disconnected for more than 30 seconds, the recording stops, and thus you lose a huge chunk of data. So that was performance 1. Performance 2, we tried to mitigate this by putting the backpack at the back of the chair and having a team of RAs constantly monitoring if the data was actually being recorded and nothing bad was happening. Now for the third performance and fourth, we had Jimmy Fort with us that find a way to bypass the antineural software, which has that huge flaw, and stream the data directly. So that was a huge help. Beside from that, I think the tools are really good. That's good, except for that particular problem. And then the People Lab have a new model of eye tracking that already stream via LSL, which means that bypass my whole API communication, where I said I need to talk to each one individually. Now you can talk to all of them at the same time. So that's already, if we had those, I would save a lot of time. I think that's mostly it, yeah.
You said yesterday there were 50 people behind the performance, and there are 50 people here.
Was it this performance you were thinking about?
Yes, I think this was the one where the device setup was the most challenging. Just the fact that we couldn't because we couldn't have all the audience arriving at a similar time. And that's why we had, again,
if this room was full with performers for 8 hours, maybe the back stage, like the research studio downstairs, where all the equipments were being charged and being set up, it was basically on, like, live for 10 hours, let's say, before and after. And that meant we just needed to we needed more hands. So we had 50, I think RAs roughly helping us for this particular, moving behind the chairs, as Sonia mentioned. Mirko mentioned as well.
Thanks. I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about this notion of synchronization and what it is, anything you're seeing or looking for, or how maybe it relates to what's already understood or seen. Could you?
Thank you. Synchronization, basically, we mean that we're looking at, brains, right? We're looking at what's going on, what's the brain activity going on the audience. When we talk about synchronization, it means that the same thing is happening for everyone. So we can see that there are different, like from scientific literature, we already knew that there is things like your attention, where your attention is going, is something that seems to modulate a lot of what's going on, right? So when people are attending to the same thing, they used to go into similar brain states. So that is something that we can quantify. Perhaps is one of the measures that we've been focusing on, because it's the one that we can use a whole brain analysis without really looking into any particular area or any particular moment, because there's not enough, probably, like spatial resolution with just 32 channels, or with a movement, or there is not enough repetitions to really, tackle something in that way. I think the person to ask about synchronization is Laura, because she's the one that has started all this new way for all us to follow with the EEG analysis. I don't know, Laura, if you want to say something?
I suppose, like in this presentation, there's two types of synchronization that we're talking about. One is device synchronization, and then one is brain synchrony. So brain synchrony depends on device synchronization. So if we're all looking at something together, we need to know that when we record that the time point that happens is the same. So it depends on device synchronization. But in detective work in the previous performance, we measured interbrain synchrony, so similarity across time in people's brain synchrony. But I don't know how much detail to go into with that, but...
Thank you. I think one question for two directions in a way. I don't know how to really put it, but so this is the data, scientific research about the brain and how this particular study would go forward in the understanding of brain in the scientific realm. Also for that understanding of the liveness, how does it maybe feed to the dance and choreography? Whether, I don't think it's because this is the data, this choreography should go that way. I don't think that's the way. But more creative, artistic motivation or concepts, or I don't know. I'm just wondering how understanding the brain activity might feedback or influence for the future of what's to come in both science and dance, whether I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining well enough. I think I'm still decoding my brain. So
yeah, I feel that's kind of a question sort of almost for later. I guess what I would say about this one is I don't necessarily foresee improving performances based on what we find. It really is about understanding what's going on. I guess what I'd like to sort of coming off also from what Joe said, I think it is good to say that in this performance there was a sort of vision of the work in which sort of around half of the performers would be wearing EEGs, which would then have allowed us to do a lot more sort of brain synchrony between performers and spectators. But it's a really nice example, and what I think why it's worth talking about it is sort of like within the artistic process and the scientific process, it just became clear that wouldn't work for the work. And I kind of, so we were in this sort of space, interesting, where from a scientific perspective it would have been really good and it would have made a better experiment. But I mean, I was performing in it myself and so were others. So on a personal level, I could understand why it didn't happen. You know, sort of, if I'm completely honest, I was very happy not to wear an EEG, even though I would have done it, you know, sort of for the sake of science. But like, so it's an interesting, that work in that sense was the most challenging because it produced, it's the only work in that sense which produced over the course of the work really a conflict between what the science would have needed and what the artistic work needed. And the navigation of that was quite intense and part of the challenging thing. Yeah. But a lot of that then also motivated, so like the works that we'll talk about after this, but also tomorrow, in many ways, respond to that and sort of deal with that question in a sort of, from the outset, more head-on. Yeah.